have you got an old shirt that you maybe don't wear anymore? Maybe you don't reach for it in your wardrobe. Maybe it's got a huge mark on the front. Maybe you've spilt tomato ketchup all down the front of it and you're thinking, damn, I can't get this stain out. I'm just going to chuck it away. Well, don't chuck it away. Put it down, step away from the bin, because I think I may have a solution. And the solution is, of course, adding a huge cat on the front. Now, this is a shirt I got at a charity shop for £1, I think. I don't really wear it, but it's a great fabric. It's lovely and thick. So I decided to put a cat on the front, which now makes me wear this shirt all the time. And I always get compliments on it, so I thought, why don't I show you how you can do it to your own clothes? And really, it's honestly not that hard, and I'm going to show you how you can do it today. You're going to need a few things for today's project. The first thing you'll need is some paper and pencils to draw your design onto. I'm going to be doing a cat today for this tutorial, but you could literally do anything and the steps would be pretty much the same. So let your heart run wild and your creativity be free. The next thing you're going to need is a sewing machine. This is my sewing machine. You probably could do this project by hand, but you need a lot of time and patience, neither of which are things that I have, so I'm going to show you how to do it with a machine. Now, my machine has its bog standard sewing foot on it. I do have a free motion embroidery foot, but for the sake of what people normally have, I'm going to show you how to do it with just your normal sewing foot. The next thing you're going to need is an iron and somewhere to iron, as well as some iron-on fusible and some hemming web. You don't need these two things, but it makes your life a hell of a lot easier for this project, so I would recommend getting those. The next thing you'll need is some scrap fabric. There's some old corduroy there and some red gingham that's left over from an old project, and I think the bit of white was from a backing of an old pair of curtains, so that goes to show you can literally use any scrap fabric you've got lying around. Preferably have it a similar fabric to what your shirt that you're ironing it onto is going to be, just so that it doesn't shrink when you wash it. But I've not had any issues with any of that so far, having done a few of these shirts. The next thing you'll need is some pins or clips to put your fabric onto your shirt with. A cup of tea, not absolutely essential, but in my case it always is. A couple pairs of scissors. I've got dressmaking and normal scissors. I'm probably going to use normal scissors today just to show you that you don't need dressmaking ones, but if you've got those, they do make your life a little bit easier. And then finally, you're going to need whatever you're going to put your patch onto. I've got a few shirts here today. I'm going to have a play around with which one looks best with the design I'm doing today. Now, I've already whizzed ahead and I've already got my cat template because I obviously already made one before. But if you don't somehow have a cat template laying around your house, it's very easy to just draw one out on a bit of paper, cut it out, all ready to go. It can be card if you prefer card, but I prefer paper. But the easiest way of doing it for symmetry is to fold your paper in half and draw half a cat head so that when you cut it out, you've got a symmetrical cat face. But if you don't mind a wonky donkey look, ignore what I just said and just go crazy freehand on your paper and then cut it out, ready for the next step. Now that you've got your template all ready to go, the next step of this project is to draw around it on your fabric using a bit of chalk or pencil if you don't have chalk. And once you've done that, you should have a lovely little cat all ready to be snipped out. Now, if you're going to use something like corduroy, like I am, I do recommend that you take note of which way your cords are going, so that you don't have a weird diagonal on your design, unless that's what you want, in which case go for it. But yeah, just to be aware, because I've made that mistake many a time myself. Alright, now I've got my cat all drawn on and ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and snip this off. I'm going to do it with these little scissors to prove that you can do it with any scissors. They don't have to be dressmaking ones. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and snip this out now. Now, the next step is where things start to get a little bit more fun. I've started to cut out the features of my cat. So I've cut him out a couple of eyes and some pupils using the old curtain backing that I showed off earlier, and this is an old pair of trousers that have been cut up relentlessly for other projects. So I used a tiny bit of that scrap to make the little eyes. I've done a little love heart nose out of the red gingham, and I've also done these little stars. I'm not sure which colour yet I'm going to use, or which shirt I'm going to use yet, so I've got a couple of different colour options. And to cut that out, I just used an old cookie cutter and drew around that. So this is the time to get really creative and use whatever you've got and make a cat that you're happy with. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to add some little ear inserts. I probably will, as I've done that on the other shirt and I thought that looked really cute. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those out while you go ahead and cut your features out. I'm going to go ahead and start putting together my eyes, and to do that I'm going to use some hemming web. But if you don't have hemming web, you can hand stitch just with a needle and thread your eyes together, or alternatively you can skip all of that and use buttons for eyes instead and just stitch buttons on, which I think also look really cute. But for me, I prefer the look of the fabric, so I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of hemming web. I've got a little roll here, which normally you use in a hem, but I found that this works really great for stitching on the features of my cat. So I just tear off, you can barely see it, but there's a tiny bit there. I'm going to put that on top of my white eyeball fabric, placing the eyeball on. I'm going to put this back down on the table before I go any further. And I'll do the same on the other one at the same time, just so that the eyes are symmetrical and not going in different directions. But that adds its own cute and charm factor if you like that. So by all means, do whatever you like with your eyes. They can't be wrong. The whole thing with this project is nothing can be wrong. So let me show you what I've done. I've gone ahead and popped some hemming web underneath these eyes here. And now I'm going to go ahead with my iron and just give them a press down so that the pupil of the eye is stuck firmly onto the white. Just give it plenty of time just to melt and stick them on. I normally flip them over as well so that the back also gets a press, just so that they're really stuck on and they're not going to go anywhere. There we are. It's actually raining outside. I don't know if you can hear that on the windows. It's absolutely chucking it down. Yeah, there's two lovely little eyeballs ready to go on the kitty cat. It's absolutely chucking it down outside right now. But boy oh boy, is it cozy in here doing this project. Right, now that my eyes are as one, I'm going to put them down onto the corduroy and also hem web those on, just so that they're roughly glued down, so that when we stitch them on, they're not going to move or shuffle or go anywhere that we don't want them to go. So while I'm doing that, I'm also going to do the same with my two little ears. Oh, that's the back. Oops. There's one. And there's the other. As you can see, I've got all my eyes, nose and ears all stuck on. I mean, they're not stuck firmly. You can see the corners of my ears are sort of still hanging off a bit, but it literally doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's literally just tacking them on so that you can now hop on to your sewing machine. Right, now I've preloaded my sewing machine. On another project I was using black thread, so I'm going to start with the only bit of sewing I use with a black thread on this particular part of the project, which will be sewing the pupils onto the whites of the eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. For this, I've got my settings on a stitch length of about 3. It doesn't really matter. You could go slightly smaller if you like, just if you want to get it really tacked on, but I don't go too small. I've just got it on the middle thread setting rather than the right hand side, but you can go to the right hand side if you want to get really close to that edge. It's up to you. I've got my tension on about 3 or 4. That should be fine. And my bobbin is obviously black as well, matched in there. Right, now as you can see, I have stitched on these little pupils, so they're all now firmly fixed to the face of the cat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap out my thread for white so that I can do the whites of the eyes, the ears, and I'll do also the little nose in white. I've gone over each feature quite a lot, a couple of times at least, around the full edge. You don't have to do this. I quite like the look of it, going over it a couple of times, but if you just make sure to stay quite close to the edge, you shouldn't need to go over it several times. But yeah, going close to the edge just stops the edges peeling up or fraying. But yeah, now we are ready to move on to the next step, which is interfacing. Now you can see that I've cut out about an inch round my cat, just to give him some space in case anything shrinks while I'm doing this. But the brilliant thing about interfacing is it makes the whole thing a lot more rigid, which makes sewing it onto the shirt so much easier. So all you've got to do is cut around the cat, and then, I don't know if you can see this very well on camera, but you see how that shimmers at the top? That there. You want that shimmer on the top so that it's on the back of your main fabric, so that when you put the iron on it, that lovely shiny plastic melts and fuses the two fabrics together. So I'm going to go ahead and take my iron and give it a good old press front and back to make sure it's nice and firmly secured on, ready for the next step. Now, as you can see, my little kitty friend has been successfully fused with the fusible webbing. So all I've got to do now is cut out round this excess, making sure that there's no fusible poking through really. And he's ready to be stitched on to a shirt. Now, this is where things get really exciting. You can lay your cat now on your shirt, whatever you're going to put it on, or sweatshirt if you're doing it on a jumper. And this is where you can really have a play around with where you want your cat to sit on the shirt. You might want it quite high, you might want it quite low. You can actually measure it using the points of the neck and the armpits if you want to be really accurate about where it's sitting. I don't tend to worry, I sort of eyeball it, and I kind of like the sort of slightly wonky look. I think it adds a bit of charm. But if you do want to do that, you can. I also recommend at that stage, once you've got it in a good place, pin it down on the first layer of the shirt. Make sure you don't go all the way through, otherwise you won't be able to wear it, which is not ideal. Once you've pinned it, what you can do is put it on, look at yourself in a mirror, make sure you're happy with the placement, make sure it's all sitting nicely in how you want it, before you then move on to stitch it. Now that we're ready to sew on the cat, I have done a few alterations to my machine. I have rethreaded it in black with a matching black bobbin. I have knocked the stitch length down to a 2, as I'm now going to be using the zigzag stitch, which I have pre-programmed it to. And my cat, as you can see, is all pinned up. He looks like he's been to an acupuncture therapist, and he is now ready to be stitched on. So all I'm going to do now is bring the t-shirt over to the machine, feed one layer through, very important, don't feed both through, otherwise you won't be able to wear the shirt at the end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a zigzag stitch running the whole way round this outside edge. Just for reference, as I'm a bit closer up, you can see it a bit easier. When you're zigzag stitching, it's really important. You can see that I've got half the corduroy in there and half the shirt underneath. And what you're going to do is try and keep that distance about the same the whole way round. And my advice while doing this is, although it's really scary, go slow, go steady. Nothing's going to happen if you go nice and slow. Try not to pull or tug, especially if it's a stretchy shirt. Try not to pull or tug it, because you'll pull and tug it out of shape, and that'll be really, really noticeable when you finish sewing on the patch. So yeah, just go slow, keep it about the same distance, and just slowly work your way along. Right, well, if that's gone to plan, you have a finished cat shirt. It's up to you. I did think about adding a little star, but having seen what it looks like, especially on a striped shirt, I think I prefer him without it. But if you do want to add one, you can go ahead and do the exact same final step in the way that you pin your star onto your cat, and then just stitch around it in a little zigzag, including on top of the patch itself, just to keep those frayed edges nice and tucked in. But if you're not going to do that,
Worry not, you have a finished cat shirt, which you can now wear with pride wherever you go.